of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So we have two items on our work session for today. One is an update on the Hampton Bays downtown planning. And our town planner is here with a couple of people online, I think, from Historical Concepts.
Okay, and
Janice, come on up.
just before you get started, I'm going to take the roll call.
Would you please take the
I
roll
would love
call?
to, yes. Supervisor Moore,
Present.
Councilwoman McNamara.
Present.
Councilman Iacili,
Present.
Councilman Pell,
Present.
Councilman Schiavone.
And 5 of us are present.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Present.
We should put that right on here, roll call.
It's going back to last administration.
Yes, President.
I know, you all used to have fun with that.
You're in good company.
Yes.
Yeah.
Morning, Janice.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Yeah,
Janice.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me this morning. So we are here, I'm here for an update on the Hampton Bays planning efforts. And Historical Concepts is on Zoom. They're here to give you an update because, well, we haven't had a chance to talk to the new members of the board about this process. In addition, the previous board voted to extend Historical Concepts' contract and ask them to do a few things, namely to meet with some business owners and stakeholders downtown, the chamber, to meet with the CAC, and to meet with the Civic to get feedback on that whole like sort of reboot idea, what could be. There's not any commitment to this, but the idea was to have them lay something out, so at least we had a visual to work from. And so with that, I have Elizabeth and Paul on Zoom. Do you guys, we don't hear you though. Are you unmuted? Can you hear us?
Hi.
Oh, yes, we can hear you.
I can hear
And they're gonna give you a little recap and then what they've done so far. And last night, we had the first of the 3 meetings, and that was with the chamber and property owners. So they're gonna give you a little summary of how that went.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Janice.
Hi, Elizabeth and Paul. We can hear you.
They can't hear us.
We cannot hear you guys.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear us.
Oh,
We can.
huh.
Looks like you're muted.
Oh, no.
Hello. Check one.
How we could be muted.
We cannot hear you.
Maybe turn your volume up.
I think
Yeah, we get it.
Charles, can you just put on the chat to them that they can speak, because we can hear them?
Okay.
We hear you. You can't hear us.
Our phone.
Our mute is often here.
You are muted.
Oh, yeah, we were
Okay.
muted.
We were muted. Can you hear us now?
Oh, wait.
Yes?
There we go.
Okay.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Now we hear you.
Great.
Hi.
Good
Hi.
morning.
Good morning. I just said you were gonna give them an update, a little sort of, what happened, to date, how you're here, what you've done so far, our meeting with the, chamber
Hey,
and
Janice.
business owners.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
Since you got 3 new board members, can they introduce themselves? And give us some,
Absolutely. They're
give
gonna
some
give you an overview
background.
and what
Okay.
they're doing, yes.
you know, history of their
Sorry,
firm?
it's really, really quiet, so we can barely hear you.
You need to speak in the mic. Could you give us a background, because you got 3 new board members, where you're from, your name of your company, and your mission, please?
Yeah, great. My name's
Start with John.
Elizabeth Dillon. This is Paul Knight. We work with a company called Historical Concepts. We are architects and planners. We do traditional-based, precedent-based design. We are based out of Atlanta, Georgia, but I run our New York City office. We've had an office here in New York City for about 10 years. We've been doing work in the Hamptons for, a little over 15 years now. We do primarily residential design out in the Hamptons, but we also do work for private developers, municipalities such as yourself, planning, visioning work as well as architecture. Paul is a certified planner that we have on staff. And so we we do have a little presentation where we have a little bit of background of our involvement with the town here. I don't know if you guys want to launch into that.
Sure.
See the screen here?
Yes.
Great. So we first started working with the town back in 2016. So this was just an overview of the schedule. We started working with the goal of generating a pattern book. We did a number of public meetings, stakeholder meetings. So we've been working with the town for about 7.5 years now on Hampton Bays. We started off that process by doing what we call a press day tour, looking at the eastern end of Long Island, some towns that were contemporaries of Hampton Bays to look at how they had developed. We are architects, we like visuals, so we went to all these towns, we measured things. This is kind of our cheat sheet, if you will, looking at the block size, the frequency of buildings. You can see the block is the building, and the figure ground diagrams here. So do some context research, and then we launched into the public outreach process. We had a series of community stakeholder meetings. We had a public meeting here where we did kind of small session breakouts, looking at visual preferences, showing a lot of images, asking the community members what they wanted the future of Hampton Bays to look like. We did an online survey where we got a little over 1,200 responses. That was comparable to that in-person workshop. Showing a lot of photos, doing what we call a visual preference survey, and the overwhelming takeaway was that the community wanted a vibrant, walkable, mixed-use downtown area that was pedestrian-oriented. So that is what we took as our goal of what future development should enable, should look like. At that point, we had developed a pattern book working with the town. Recently, about a year ago, we re-engaged and we brushed up all of this data gathering that we had done previously of what the community wanted. The previous town board, I know, did a listening tour to kind of check back in with the community to see if this still held true, and overwhelmingly it did, because the same findings were confirmed. So then we said, all right, we've heard what the community wants the future of Hampton Bays to look like. Let's look at what the current zoning allows along the business, along the main corridor there in Hampton Bays. And so this is a study of essentially what the by right zoning allows. The darker gray colored C is the building surrounded by a parking lot, essentially. So really what is allowed under current zoning is essentially big box retail. There are some provisions for senior housing or mixed use, but generally the form is similar. Big box, setbacks in the street, lots of parking. That is not conducive to what we've heard the community wanted. This does not create a walkable, vibrant, mixed-use community. It is very much oriented towards the car. All of this open space, is not a comfortable place for pedestrians to really spend time and linger. So with this finding, the previous town board asked us to take all of this research and our professional expertise and to create some illustrations of what future development in Hampton Bays might look like if it was developed in a way that is keeping with the community's desires. So we brushed back out our figure ground diagrams here, the context, and said, all right, this is not conducive to that vibrant mixed-use environment. What is, in the previous conversations, community has identified these towns as good examples of what they might want to be similar to, not references of, but similar to Southampton, Greenport, Sag Harbor, Sayville. So we pulled these back out, looking at the block length, how frequent is there an intersection? Hampton Bays along Montauk Highway there right now, the block is 1,800 feet long, sorry.
1,800 feet long.
About 1,800 feet long. If you look at Southampton, the blocks are, 300 feet long, kind of 300 to 400 to 500 feet blocks seem to be the norm in these towns at the bottom. So more frequent intersections, higher frequency of buildings, less space between the buildings. So you get a sense here for some of the differences. And so that was our jumping off ground to dive into the design, so I'll turn it over to Paul to give you an overview on the design process and where we landed.
So we took that same study area that we were looking at here, and we wanted to apply those principles of good design to this area. And so what we started off with doing first, kind of taking an X-ray of the town and doing a SWOT analysis. So, we're architects. We look at things visually, and we look at things in terms of dimension. And so to us, a number of things immediately kind of jump off the page. So you've got like all these, what we call missing teeth along your main street, where, there are buildings that are too far separated from each other. And so they don't contribute to the street wall or to the outdoor room of the street, which is what you really need to have this vibrant, walkable main street. You've got lots that are, way too deep, and you've got buildings that aren't facing onto the park. And so your park is kind of just way in the back, and it's not really engaged with Main Street. And so we did those observations and then asked ourselves, well, what could we do to improve on this? What are some of the opportunities we have? Some of those might be increasing connectivity, reducing block size, putting new streets in here, consolidating some of these parcels so that we can get buildings in the front and parking in the back, and those sorts of things. And so to get started, rather than kind of looking at these odd kind of parcel lines that are really hard to work with, at first, we're dreamers. We just kind of lay some white out over the whole area and ask ourselves, what's the ideal plan? If we could do anything, what would we do? So based on all those principles from all the towns that we looked at, this is kind of a great ideal plan. Small blocks, buildings up to the street, small building footprint, creating all these street walls and outdoor rooms for all these great streets, connecting to the park, et cetera, et cetera. And then after that, we kind of use that plan as an underlay and then overlay these odd parcel lines that we have to work with, because we're working in reality. And so then, you can kind of see, oh, okay, well, what if we were able to create some streets through here? And we do a number of iterations for that before we kind of land on a plan that is that kind of works, for all those principles. And this is the plan that we ended up with, that checks all those boxes, creates those vibrant, walkable streets, connects the park to Main Street, draws people into the park, and as people are allowed to park in the back of these buildings, the real face of the community is allowed to be this beautiful, clean, vibrant, walkable street.
And the hope is that people will park in that central parking lot, leave their car there, and walk to multiple destinations, interact with their neighbors, frequent businesses along the street.
And the building footprint that we're showing is really just, one iteration of what this could turn into. We're not necessarily saying, this is the exact building footprint that should go there. The framework of these new streets and the alleys and the consolidating the parking in the back and fronting onto the park, that's kind of the thing that should really kind of stick, with this area. And then the buildings can kind of, plug and play or push and pull around.
Yeah, but the buildings could evolve over time. We're trying to show how the buildings should meet the street and the public realm, but the height of those buildings, the use of those buildings might change over time as the needs of the community change. I do want to point out one thing that you saw in that plan. We generally left the buildings fronting along Montauk Highway untouched. There was a consensus from the community that they really liked those historic buildings, that they felt like that was really crucial to the character of Hampton Bays. So we've really focused the new development on the new cross streets here to try to enhance the existing character, but not replace.
this is what those new streets might look like. We designed these to be traditional in character, to match the character of Hampton Bays. 2 stories, 1 story, showing some roof line variety. This is the view from the park. So we're standing in Good Ground Park, looking at the new development, potential development. And then this is an aerial with Montauk Highway in the foreground and Good Ground Park back here in the back. And we have a SketchUp model fly-through little video of the project that I can play for you.
And we'll say, I guess, as you're, watching this, that really this exercise has been to generate illustrations of what future development that we believe is in keeping with what the community wants could look like. We've generated, designed these visuals, and so we are now embarking on the process of sharing this back to the community. We're sharing this here with you, the town board. We had a meeting last night with the Chamber of Commerce and property owners, and we're scheduled to meet with CACB and Civic later this month to present the same design to them to get feedback. So we're really hoping that we could use this, these illustrations to build consensus from the community of what they want to see, so that you as the town board have clear marching orders and can determine what the right tool to enable this sort of development would be.
And so here we are in Good Ground Park. Again, these buildings are just kind of placeholders, just, a straw man of, what this could look like. Whether we want, 1 story or 2 story, whether we want townhouses or, what kind of mixed use do we want facing onto the park. And then this is looking down that western New Street that we proposed, heading back toward Montauk Highway. And you can see all the parking and service and trash and everything is in the backs of these lots, because when you walk through a town or experience a town, you experience it through the street. That's the real face of the town. And so in order to capitalize on that, you kind of want to put all the back of house stuff in the back.
So as a part of this, we have made some assumptions on those buildings that you see, what portions of the ground floor might be retail, some might be office, perhaps the second floor is a mix of office and residential. So we put together some, program information assumptions on how many units, so that this information could be used by the town to start looking at sewage flows, engineering, design elements, to confirm the feasibility and impact of development. So with that, I guess I would hand it back over to Janice to really talk about, what the next steps for you all as town board might be.
It's a little difficult for us to see the numbers that you've got up there. Could you just tell us how many residential units, how many commercial units, office, retail, if it's broken down in that way? Oh, no, they're muted.
Do you hear us?
Sorry, I think we heard that.
Oh.
The end of that question, were you asking about the number of residential units?
Yeah, and the other, and, all the units, what's the breakdown? Because we can't really.
Or if you could
read
zoom in
that.
on that.
Or if you could zoom in on that legend.
Sure. So, for the building footprint that we've illustrated, it's about 145,000 square feet, and we're assuming on average 2 floors per building. And so then total, that's a little less than 300,000 square feet that we've illustrated in this plan. Of that, we kind of allocated 55,000 square feet to ground floor retail, which we focused on the intersection 28,000 square feet to second floor office, and then the remainder to 160 residential units, and then with a little less than 500 parking spaces.
All surface parking in the lot and on the street.
And the 160 units, that is based on maximum build-out, based on what the individual property owners would like to actually put on these parcels. Is that correct?
It's just using these footprints of square footage and taking kind of an average
Okay.
unit size of that 1290, which would include circulation space. So it's really, we've not designed specific units. It's really looking at the square footage and kind of just designing by that healthy planning factor that we've seen. That the units themselves probably would, be smaller and larger than that, but that was, a reasonable average to use. The actual design and layout of those units, yes, would be determined by the individual property owners.
Individual property owners, okay. We're talking about zoning and not a specific project of 160 units, I just want the world to know that, Okay, thank you.
I have a question for Elizabeth and Paul. Thank you very much for putting this together for us, number one. I'm very focused on making sure that there is feedback and input on any of the projects that come before the town. When you mentioned the survey that was done, those 1,200 respondents, do you have any demographic info within the respondents? Do you know who they were, the types of folks that you assessed, or was it just a completely random sample?
We do. This is kind of our Click Notes version of the presentation. So that's what let me grab.
Sorry for that.
And this was a survey in 2016, correct?
We did a follow-up
Yeah.
survey
Okay.
more recently.
Okay.
More in-depth.
Yeah, and we do have additional documents from the earlier round work that we could share with you as well. Great. So here, Paul, pulling up some of the summaries from that.
So we've got 62% for year-round residents.
And so we do, we have the full survey results that we could get to Janice to distribute to you guys. We also had generated, a document here back in January of 2017 that has a summary of our context, our precedent research, the notes from all of our community meetings, and these results. So we'd be happy to circulate that if anybody wants to look at that.
Yeah, I would definitely like to view that in greater depth. Thank you.
That would be fantastic.
Survey too, the most recent.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
updated.
for sure.
version.
And I'm also interested in the site visitations that were taken. We really did our due diligence at that time, I remember, and people from Hampton Bays, along with you all, went to different communities and, like you said, measured sidewalks. And I just want to underscore that because I think that's important. And, they looked at other communities and decided what they wanted for Hampton Bays.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have one more question. Do you have, roughly speaking, a percentage of what is a part of this plan that will be redevelopment and what is a percentage of new development? Is there anything that outlines that? Or,
So what you see drawn here, in the kind of tan rendering, we're assuming that is all new
development. Okay.
So it's not, you can see the underlayment of where there are existing buildings on those parcels.
Right.
For the purpose here, we were kind of aggregating some of those properties that are owned by individuals who seem, interested in redevelopment.
Okay.
So just showing what it might be, what the future Hampton Bays might look like if we were using those parcels in particular, but we are not showing, redevelopment of all of the properties.
You mentioned when you were showing one of the first slides that had some red writing on it, that the buildings that front on Montauk Highway, that one, there's gaps in between them, and I didn't, not clear on what you said as to why we're not addressing that. Isn't it possible to address that without doing any negative impact on the historical nature of the structures?
I mean, I think the hope is that long-term, the whole study area, kind of both the north and south sides here, could be redeveloped. That there is opportunity to add additional buildings along Montauk Highway, like we spoke of, in an ideal world, I think if we're talking long-term, I think that is what would be most conducive to a really healthy, vibrant, walkable community. We were really focused in this exercise on the phase one of, kind of what the first phase of development might look like, the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, that would be more easily executed in more 5 to 10 years versus beyond that. And so the hope is that if redevelopment of this area could begin first, this could show the community what is possible, hopefully build excitement, and then that this sort of development could be replicated or continue along Montauk Highway on the south side of the highway as the development of those properties is available.
Well, is it that the lots are larger and, can you go back to that slide that you just were on with the writing that showed the gaps?
Yeah.
Yeah. So does that have, Janice, how would that be addressed? You had mentioned something about the plot.
Yeah, I mean,
redesigning
at this
that.
point, you would it's just noted that those areas could be infill. It comes down to the individual property owners and whether or not they wanted to infill.
I'm sorry, your voice got a lot softer, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just saying, it would come down to allowing for that infill if that's desired, and then,
But it's not currently allowed for?
it is. Currently, you can build VB up to the road. That's the idea of VB, definitely. But their exercise was sort of focused on new development and just leaving the character of Montauk Highway alone. But their recommendation as planners and architects would be to fill in the missing teeth over time.
How many different property owners are there? A lot.
On the 10 acres?
Yeah, do you
Yeah.
guys have that information? We know that one person aggregated several parcels, but there are quite a few left that are
Yeah.
individually owned. I think they're having a hard time hearing.
Sorry, we're having a very hard time hearing you if you're asking us.
Is it our mic?
It might be
Okay.
your mic. They seem to hear them on this side, but it might be that mic.
Oh,
The question was, how many property owners are in that 10 acres? Individual property owners.
Yeah.
Have we explored any incentives to get those areas filled in?
no.
No.
Well, we did. We did a
The
form.
public counting here, you can see, there are a number that are owned by a number of Montauk LLC, which are a common owner in our understanding, so those could be aggregated.
It was about 6 that we aggregated.
6 owners, is that what you're talking about?
Including the Hampton Bays Fire District is. That one, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Here, yeah.
And I was gonna say, I know you were asking about the redevelopment of other parcels, and that, we had drafted the pattern book, back in 2017, that had general guidelines that, could be applied still to, individual property owners outside of this outline that Paul has drawn, who wanted to redevelop or, improve their properties in keeping with the character. They could also use these guidelines on a smaller scale on their individual properties.
Question that I have, is the pattern book available online?
Yes.
Okay.
So, but that has not been adopted by the board?
It was adopted and annulled. So
Okay.
it would have to be re-adopted if you want.
So whatever the alleged shortcoming was with the seeker process. Is that something that we can, start and redo so that we can now adopt the standards? Whatever
The
it
pattern
was that
book
was a
is sort of a
problem.
standalone, like, redevelopment. It's really just an architectural style book, so that you stay consistent with, say, window rhythm or
Yeah.
roof lines. So that's sort of not reliant on any of the, new zoning.
And-
That's something you could do.
And that was a result of public input from the people of Hampton Bays, along with the visitations to other communities in conjunction with our plant,
Right.
with this company.
The issue with some of the
Okay.
pattern book was that some of the stuff that then went into the form-based code, like the block length stuff, was in the pattern book. So if you wanted to look at that and remove things that belong in zoning and just keep that as a architectural style guidebook,
Hmm.
that's one option. The other thing is, like, when we get to whatever it is that everyone wants to do, then we can look at our options on how to rezone it, and then, of course, we have to do, secret updated.
How did the
for
meeting
that.
with the chamber go last night?
I think it went very well. Do you wanna hear from them or me, or?
Whoever.
Most of the folks there were extremely positive. The business owners, the property owners, they all just wanna see Hampton Bays, progress and not stagnate or deteriorate, which they feel is happening now. That it's not moving forward, that
It's
it's
going backwards.
going backwards. There was a lot of talk about, we used to have diners and luncheonettes and these things, and, now we don't have these things anymore, excuse me. And so there was a lot of, sort of regret and remorse that they would really like to see more businesses succeed there and more vibrancy and all the things that Elizabeth and Paul were talking about. So I think it was a positive, bunch, Supervisor.
One thing I would like to do, just to get back to the pattern book for 1 second, is to say that it sounds like filling in the gaps might be prompted by us putting out the pattern book, giving people design guidelines. So maybe we could, at another work session in the near future, review the pattern book and take out anything that would be problematic,
Sure,
and then get that done,
that's good.
if everybody's inclined to do
Architectural
that.
styles?
Yeah,
And
it
that's
sounds
great.
like it's
I-
pretty much complete anyway.
Yeah, I like the pattern book. And a lot of the folks that I speak to in Hampton Bays also like, when they look at the designs, I get positive feedback.
Because you thought that also that would have helped move things along, like other properties that wanted to be redeveloped. If they'd had that in place, it would have made things easier for planning board and,
Absolutely, the planning board always can use some standards to hold an application up against, so that it's not an arbitrary, situation. They need to have, a good basis for decisions. So the pattern
Guidelines.
book is definitely, a welcome thing, and it also helps investment, because then there's no guessing. People who want to invest and come locate their business here, they don't want to do 10 iterations of something to try to get to somewhere, and they don't have any certainty as to what anyone wants to see. So the pattern book helps us say, we wanna see this, and if you're doing, and it doesn't force you into anything. It has at least several styles of buildings, so you could do, and they have it here, like, there's, different
nice.
names for the style of architecture.
Mhm.
And it just says, if you're going to do this style, you don't make a hodgepodge of windows and roof lines, you do it this way. And
Yeah.
if you're gonna do that style, you do it that way.
No, that's beautiful,
Mhm.
that's a lot of work, and probably, some of the council people have already reviewed it, but we haven't, I'm sure we'd
No,
all
I
like to
think
see
it's
it again.
important to revisit it.
Yeah,
So a lot of do's and don'ts there. How to, not put conflicting materials together or different
Mhm.
styles that would not make a lot of visual sense. And that was the idea behind the pattern book.
it seems like a lot of people were talking about there's not enough office space, there's not enough retail, there's not enough ice cream, restaurants, I didn't hear anybody say anything about needing more apartments. And 160 just seems like such a lot. And I don't know, maybe this has already been talked about before, So forgive me for just coming in now on this, but, you know, is that a necessary component? Do we have to have that? I mean, it's nice to have some apartments above the stores, but, you know, do you have to have it, or is it, can we just put something in where there's shops for people to go to? It sounds like they want a courtyard where they can sit and eat the ice cream, and then they want something to take them from Montauk Highway Main Street to the park. You know, so is there something we could do to draw people up to the park without, maybe we, you know, you don't have, or, and add the parking. So I think that all looks great. You need the parking because there isn't much, and
Well, yeah, I
and the
think what you heard
courtyard
last night
area.
was, especially the movie theater owners say, you can't build these things anymore without a residential component. Remember, that was.
Yeah, but I just didn't.
Because the economics don't really work. The rents don't pay for the maintenance, the taxes, the insurance, and all that it takes per square foot to build such a building. They are looking for that revenue. You know, whatever density you land on is whatever you find appropriate, and I'm not saying you should or shouldn't put that number there, but the general feeling for downtown is also to have people living and working there. Like, that is part of the 24/7 appeal of a downtown, is that.
With the existing zoning in place, there is a senior housing component that is as of right that could go in tomorrow.
Yes.
How many units was that?
Paul, do you have that? The senior housing option, the SC 44,
66 units.
166.
So that's right there, you just hit the number that we're putting over retail. The problem is, from what I gather from the conversations that I've had, is the retail's like the bread and butter. Like, that's what they need, that's a given. It's also having those people there are more likely to be the ones to go downstairs and use the shops, and, you know, not shop on Amazon, because right downstairs there's a place where they can go get what they need to go get. And then also, like, the whole nighttime thing of area of having, like, if you go into some of these other areas where they have, it's a nighttime event. It's people that live there, they stay there, it's a younger, I want to say it's a younger demographic that lives in downtown areas because they like the walkability and being able to get on the train and go somewhere and not having to get in a car and go somewhere. They can go downstairs and they can have a drink and they can walk back to their apartment.
Eyes on the street.
I get 160 sounds like a lot of units, but I think you have to put it in context of, as of right, there can be 160 senior units.
And also, as of right today, is 108 under VB, if I recall correctly, so it's less.
What do you
than-
mean by that?
Right now, today's VB zoning, we did that calculation in the first round, and we calculated about 100, I wanna say 108.
And this is based on maximum build-out as per the owners. And
Yes.
160, we're not
So
requiring,
160 is
No.
only 52.
we're not
more than-
requiring
But-
160. That would be the individual decisions
Yeah.
of the property owners. If they choose to have an ice cream store with an apartment or two above, and they could just have the ice cream store.
With
So-
an office.
But what are you
Right.
talking
So it's
about,
based on
160?
individuals' decisions
They
and the amount they
designed-
want to invest in Hampton Bays.
They did a theoretical drawing here, a little
Uh-huh.
program, and said, well, based on our drawing, that you see this was the picture of it, this accounted for 160. That doesn't mean that you have to do, anybody has to do 160.
But that's not the current zoning.
That's not the current zone.
So how can we say that as of right,
We're not saying
senior
that.
housing can go in with
Oh,
168?
SC 44, yes, as, we have a floating zone called Senior Citizen 44, which is a overlay, like a float,
It's a
they're
floating
called
zone.
floating zones, and they get landed. And,
Mhm.
and the characteristic of a senior citizen zone is that to land it downtown is exactly where you want it, so it's.
But you'd have to have a zone
It
change
has
to
to
get
have-
it
It's
there.
not
It's not
there
an as of
already.
right.
It's not P, it's a floating zone, so a board would have to land it, but it would be, you'd be hard pressed to deny such a thing, because
Well,
this ticks all the boxes of where it would actually belong. Senior housing should belong in places where our seniors can walk and not need to drive.
So it's
and
not there
access
now,
services.
but it would be likely approved to
Somebody
go
could
there.
come in and request this floating zone be landed here.
And that's all I'm pointing out, is there are other things that can be done currently
Mhm.
that would result in the same, if not more, than what, and it's not even what's being proposed, it's a make-believe kind of number based on square footage.
Exactly. Of course, you know, everybody wants to know like what's gonna happen, and nobody has a crystal ball. We don't know if someone's gonna wanna build something or not, but the so-called entitlement or opportunity is there. So when a prospective buyer or someone who owns it already goes to buy it, they go, well, what, you know, they're asking this much for it, and what can I build? There's gotta be some way of knowing what that number is generally. And that's what we do with the zoning. We figure that out. And you kind of back into that number based on parking, based on, you know, code parameters, setbacks.
But there's flexibility here, right? Because
course.
and
There's
I
always
think the
gonna be
line of
some.
questioning really just of that number of 160. It really just stems from the concerns that we've heard over and over about density in Hampton Bays in particular. And we would just want to make sure that when we move forward, we're able to sort of incorporate what we're getting in terms of feedback. That way we can build a consensus that works for the entire community. And I guess that leads me to, you know, this Janice, this will be a process, right? This is sort of like the part two of the first step, part two of gaining community input, right? Have you scheduled these meetings now with the Civic and the CAC? Are they
Yes.
officially?
Yes,
Great.
they're on their agendas. For the 29th is the Civic, and the 18th is the CAC via Zoom.
Excellent.
So they will be there to get some input. And then the question is, what else do you want them to do? You know, that then their part in this will have been somewhat completed. They did their fly-through, they'll do the public stakeholder, and then we'll just have to figure out, like you said, maybe we'll look back at the pattern book. We'll look back at, you know, we just need a roadmap forward if you wanna go forward.
I just
Well,
had,
after the community engagement, then we should have public hearings here and at the senior center in Hampton Bays, in the community.
I just have one other legal question on it, whereas the downtown overlay district that was annulled had a much bigger area.
Yes.
And part of the pushback on that was it didn't take into consideration the entire downtown area. And now we've made that area even smaller. Can we legally do that?
As long as you
Starting
plug it
over.
back into the corridor, study, you know, you can look at any area
Okay.
that you want.
You're just
It just
redefining
comes
yours.
down to the technical side of saying, okay, if we had this density here, and then we put this density there, we don't wanna just look at, and, you know, you wanna.
Well, that's
look
my
at it
whole
as
thing,
a
because if we're
whole.
saying, you know, this much density in this one small area, and then we don't take into consideration what's possible, you know, even though that, the rest of that area is pretty much built, but there's nothing saying it couldn't change hands or become something different, or,
Well, I think that's important because the other side of this whole coin is the sewer
Yes, you-
district, right? And, what would need to happen there, and they're going to come in, so you've also have Hayduck Engineering partnered with H2M, our water district engineers, who have been looking at the sewer district boundary, and then what's the right size for that? And that will inform your density overall. And that's the hard look at, like, well, if we're planning for this, you know, how much are you allocating for whatever you need and for the future? So, it's a balancing act. It's not, like we're saying that they should, you know, run out and do, you know, we had done a theoretical development program of 250 over 10 years, and that was something to figure out, something to assess the secret for, which did not work out. Now this is about 100, you know, 90, less than that in this area. So either you're gonna say, well, no, only, you know, pick a number, is it appropriate here? Because we also want to account for what if somebody across the street does come in and the fire district sells those properties and something changes, should we allocate, you know, how much everyone gets, so that you know, and then that's a way to regulate density. You can do it a number of ways.
Did the
But-
engineers indicate when they would have some proposal for us, you know, something for us to consider, the options for the size and location of the sewer?
Yes, and I will put them on your calendar for the work session, probably the end of January or the first one of February,
Oh, good.
so that way you can ask them.
So as of right in the current zoning today, it could be a big box store that goes in.
I mean, BB, we really don't want big box stores.
I know we don't want it, but I'm just saying,
There
it's
are
a
ways
chance
around
somebody
those
could do it.
regulations, like aggregating things, and of course, a supermarket is allowed that's 40,000 square feet, so that is what we mean when we say big box.
Uh-huh.
You know, our goal has always been to keep VB smaller.
Yeah.
But there are ways around those parameters
Yeah.
that we hope that people would not come and try to use.
Yeah. But you run the risk that somebody would if we don't make a change.
I think we've been at this for a long time, and there's a lot of people who just are saying, you know, if you don't do anything, you're not gonna get anywhere. So, like, there just has to be some decisions by you all as to what do you wanna do and how do you wanna do it. And I want what you want. So whatever you tell me you wanna do is we will pull the
Yeah.
switches and levers to go in that direction.
I agree, you can't just stand still, because then, you know, you don't just stay the same, it stagnates, and I think people do want something, you know, different, a little bit different, brighten things up, but it's just the balancing of the density.
Yes,
You know.
and that's important to, the constituents here in Hampton Bays, we get that, we understand that. The other thing is just that if you have this opportunity, you know, and you lose the opportunity, you know, you won't gain another opportunity until those buildings deteriorate in 80, 100 years, you know, so it's really not always conducive to wait too long. And we've been, I mean, I've been here 20 years, we've been talking about this, we've been waiting. And then just this starting in 2017, it's been a long time, so there's that.
Would we be required to do any traffic mitigation? I know with the recent plan, we were considering opening up Good Ground Road, or actually, I shouldn't say opening up, but taking steps to create a right-of-way from Good Ground Road to the intersection where the former diner was. We wanted to have that, we were planning on having that right-of-way there and not paving it, but for future possible traffic mitigation. Do we need to do something with traffic if we were to go forward with this?
Well, first I would say to land on a number, and then we would know what we need to do.
Okay. Right.
It's sort of, people want us to be very scientific, but there's also an art to it. It's just life, and it's very hard to be totally scientific about just how people wanna live their lives, and people just need apartments and to have some place to live. And by people, I mean graduates of Hampton Bays, children from this community who don't have anywhere to go. And maybe some seniors, that would be nice. And people
When-
who live here who don't wanna maybe maintain a whole house anymore and wanna live downtown, so,
When we had one of
we're
our,
aiming for, who we're trying to do this for.
right, and when we had one of our public hearings in Hampton Bays in 2018, we had a significant segment of the population come out and ask us to do this, or like this, or, you know, provide more mixed-use apartments, you know, young people who wanted to live above a whatever and be in a downtown area.
Could we preliminarily put together some sort of assessment of traffic patterns? Maybe, I don't know, if Tom Houghton or somebody in engineering or can look at where the traffic flow tends to go.
Oh, sure, we have
and
lots of traffic studies.
yeah, and maybe can just put something preliminarily together just to provide some idea to the public that this could be the impact, this could be what we anticipate, just, you know, as something, as a rough idea, so people understand what could be the impacts. And it
Sure,
also
but-
gives us some understanding too as a town board.
100%. The thing is that the impacts aren't all on day one.
Sure.
You know, so people
Could be
build
years.
things, it's
Sure.
over
Mhm.
time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that seems to get lost in the conversation. Everybody just jumps to, you know, in
The
the last
after.
case, this is
Build out.
250
Right.
units, it's sudden death, forget it. So it's just over time, people's investment, their timing, not everyone's gonna, necessarily
Sure.
build. And even, the larger property owner here didn't wanna, he never set out to build 160. This is for others to avail themselves with
Mhm.
as well. So we would have to look at all of the impacts of your action, if that is what you wanna do.
Okay.
And as far as traffic goes, people are in Hampton Bays area, because of the morning traffic and how snarled it gets in the neighborhoods, something like this would not necessarily draw more morning traffic to Hampton Bays.
Well, the
And
idea is,
it-
if somebody lived there and then worked there, they wouldn't be using their car at all.
Right.
That would be ideal. That's not necessarily, we can't
Right.
mandate that if you live there, you have to work there. I mean, we don't know
Never
where
know.
people work.
I just think
So-
given the current, traffic conditions that we're facing, I think it's
Mhm.
important that we at least do some sort of preliminary assessment of
We
whatever data
absolutely
we have.
Plenty of data to
Okay.
look at,
Okay.
and we can provide that to you.
Fair enough.
And I agree, we don't wanna exacerbate the traffic.
Yeah.
But also, you don't wanna plan for only single car occupancy. I have a great graphic I'll share with you all on email, but it shows like 177 people in their cars, and it's a traffic jam. And then those same people just sitting on a roadway, and you see how spaced out they actually are, and then it shows them, on a bicycle, and then it shows them on like a bus or a and it's like, so when you start to think about alternative transportation, walking, biking, trolleys,
Yeah.
other
Theoretically,
ideas.
yeah, theoretically, a teacher
Train.
who works in Southampton could live in this
Carpool,
area,
carpool.
walk over to the train and take the train
Take the
and
train
the
one
commuter
stop.
connection
Exactly.
and
Let
the
me
hopper
ask
to
you-
their job.
Extra question, not to change the subject, but do you think a carpool parking lot would help the traffic? So if you had it somewhere west of the canal?
Yes, I do, and in fact, long ago, at the site of the BES
Yes, that's why I bring it up.
battery
Yes.
proposal, that same property owner wanted to do that. He
Yeah.
wanted to create like, sort of a place where everybody stages their trucks and leaves them there, and, cause it was on the other side of the canal, on the east
So
side.
you think that could be feasible?
I mean, I always thought that was a great idea, but it
Yeah.
just was almost ahead of its time. That was a long time ago, but there was no
Maybe we can
takers.
review that,
Yeah, that's.
Yeah,
see if the people would want that instead.
What did you say about the overlay, the scope of the prior one,
Thank
and
you.
now it's smaller?
Well, the prior
That's a
one
great idea.
was, it went further to the east, it went further to the west, and it had the entire south side of the street to the railroad station included. So it was a big, and there was like an A area and a B, like it was more,
yeah. There you go,
it was that whole area. And now we've condensed it to that,
just the top.
yeah.
And why did it get condensed? Is it
Because the stuff on the south is really, it's done. It's
developed.
built out, it's,
I
the
always
fire
thought,
department just bought the last kind of piece.
used to be a gas station there years ago,
Mhm.
all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, the thinking was because it was largely built out, and that wasn't really the focus, so the town board, started over again, and thought,
We kind
Let's
of
just
wanted to
focus
focus
on what
on,
we're focing on, which
on
is
getting
accessing
those
the
shops
park.
along the park and having access
Because I
and,
walked there like a long time ago when I first moved to Hampton Bays, some trails back there, going to that pond. It's a lot of wet back there, from like just past where Bob's is.
Yeah, wet, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Wetlands, that's a recharge basin,
Yeah,
so there is that.
and it goes all the way to the
But
west
no
too.
wetlands.
I'm looking at,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm looking at our GIS, there's no New York State wetlands
Yeah,
there.
I think it's,
But the recharge basin is
a lot of
sunk,
places,
all the
a lot of
roads
places
drain
that used to be swampy have dried up.
Yeah,
in.
it was very
But,
swampy back there.
but this this plan that they came up with sort of stays off that fire district piece and away from that sump. So it's set off of that.
But it's
So
not
this-
unusual to, take just one little section to do that?
You can plan in increments, there's nothing stopping anyone. Yes, the criticism is that they don't want segmentation, and you look at this like in incremental pieces and you're not considering the whole. So every time you look at a little piece, you still have to plug it back into the whole, and we get that, we understand that, we have no problem doing that. But that doesn't mean you can't focus on some piece of the whole. And in fact, secret actually allows for actual segmentation at certain points as long as you articulate why you're doing it that way. So there are case law, and there's a lot in secret that actually understands that you can't always have perfect knowledge of an entire geographic area, but, and you, because you wanna do one thing, you can't do that. You know, you can. It's just a matter of plugging it back into the whole, and then as the whole progresses, making sure that you're taking into consideration all the potential impacts and mitigating for them.
And it's most substantiated here because with the form-based codes, they are built and made to be done on property that is less developed. I mean, ideally, it's not developed at all, but since that's the area, it's easier to substantiate why you would focus there for that.
Right, and here you have millions of dollars of investment. You bought the 38-acre park, put in millions to build the park. Now we want to be able to protect that access to the park and allow for that to be pulled into the community to Main Street. And that was always the goal here.
I just hope
And
that-
incentivize more investment in Hampton Bays. Because that's what we're
That
talking
is,
about,
you know,
private
truly
investment.
revitalization.
Yeah.
That is what we do. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just hoping that people understand when they're looking at this, that I know people want to get down to like, okay, well, we need a brewery here, and we need an ice cream shop here, and we need a bookstore there. And I just hope they understand that that's not us. That's free market. That's whatever people feel like they can make money doing in these buildings is what they'll become. But I think we're trying to do is lay out the framework for making it conducive for those businesses to even function and be profitable, because they'll have, you know, the retail and they'll have the residential component. And we're just trying to set it up for those things. I mean, I've had people say, well, we should have a daycare, because then when parents come to pick up the kids and the kids can use the park, and then they pick up the kids. I mean, it's a great idea, and it's a great, like, you know, and then the parents would shop in the stores. But that's not us. And I just want people to understand, like, that's not us. We're trying to put the framework in place to make things like that, what the community wants, conducive to happening, but we can't, at the end of the day, say, you know, this has to be a brewery, and this has to be a restaurant, and this has to be an ice cream shop.
That's right. That's 100% what it is. Is like if you set it up to be a forum, then that's what historical concepts is all about. Like, that's historic, that's sort of good planning. Then the bones are there and set, and then you build the body, and then what
So-
goes in it later. But if you don't set it up that way, eventually it'll get cleared away, and somebody new will say, "Hey, let's do it this way."
So
you know?
the framework is really there to hopefully attract the type of businesses that the community will want. Obviously, it's no guarantee, but that's why we need to work with, you know, historical concepts to just look at that design book, for instance, to really try to match what we'd like, you know, to align with the community's interest.
Absolutely. And that is true. We can't dictate that somebody be one thing or another. That's why our table of uses are so varied. In different areas, you can have different uses, and they can choose, because life changes. It's again, it's a lot more of an art than a science.
And this is the United States, and we believe in free markets.
Yes.
Yes, and property rights.
Within
by
zoning,
the way.
right.
So, Elizabeth and Paul, do you have anything else you wanted to add?
You guys really hit it right there in the last couple minutes of conversation. That's, you know, really trying to find what the community wants, to put that framework in place to make sure that the sort of development they want is possible and easily achievable, and really to give the property owners, you know, a little bit more predictability in the process, that they know if they come in with an application to you all that is consistent with this vision and this framework, that it will be an easier approval process. They have a little bit more certainty in the steps that they need to take. And so hopefully that will really help to enable and encourage this sort of development.
Right. It's hard when everyone goes, but we don't want this. But it's allowed in that table of uses. It becomes an argument and a lot of upset, and it's easier to just sort of even look at those uses and say, well, if you don't want these things, then why are we allowing them here, you know? And unfortunately, in this case, one of the things that people don't want is apartments, but that where else are you going to put them? You know, that's the question. That's the $1 million
I
question.
think they get worried when you say apartments.
Right,
Where they're gonna be.
apartments over stores,
Yeah,
and
what
some
are they gonna-
townhouses are
yeah.
in this plan, yeah. So
They're
if you don't want that, or no one wants that, I just, you know, as a planner, I think you need that. How are you
Well,
going to have a
And the
successful
community is
downtown?
asking for that. I mean, I know some members of the community are not, but, I mean, a vibrant, mixed-use downtown area is good for businesses, it's good for the community. And plenty of people have told me that they're interested in that, and young people too.
Even the people that were against the original plan because of residences were basically saying, we don't mind having apartments over stores or apartments over retail, we just don't want 4-story apartment buildings.
Right,
Which there's none of that in this plan.
no.
Yeah, that seems like a compromise that people might want to get behind. Unless we were, I mean, did anybody look at whether keeping it at the 108 that it is now in the VB zone would be workable? Or does
Yes,
it,
the
you
people
really
that
have
are
to
here
have the?
said they can't build it at that.
But you could do 108, but you could have 3-bedroom units. And then you have kids.
Yeah.
Right, which, you know, that's the other thing.
Which is if you do 160 and they're smaller units, then you have 1- and 2-bedroom apartments.
Yeah,
Or units.
units.
I like kids.
I do too. I'm just saying that in Hampton Bays, they have very high school taxes.
Yeah, I know.
And so they're worried about more kids in the
Right.
district and they're,
Absolutely.
you know, and it's a concern, so.
We did do a financial analysis too of the revenue, and that more than offset the school tax. And there was a healthy amount.
Well, and that's what people don't
tax
understand too. It's 160, it's not 160
Kids.
affordable units that won't be paying taxes into the district. These are market rate apartments, most of them. I'm sure some will have to be affordable based on our code, but most of them are market rents that will pay they'll have to pay the taxes into the district.
That's right.
The businesses will have to pay the taxes into the district, and the businesses won't have any school kids.
So
So-
just to rephrase that, Cindy, are you as a woman, are you saying that that would be good for the taxpayers to offset some of the tax burden, for instance?
Having more retail that's vibrant and that's usable into an influx into the tax base of having
Right.
retail businesses, I think, yes, would be a big
Offset the tax
plus for the taxpayers in Hampton Bays. I think it's a big piece they're missing is business revenue from.
Because we often hear from people who say that they're paying high tax. They feel like they're paying higher taxes in Hampton Bays. So
Well,
this
on their
is a-
school, they are.
right,
Because they don't really
yeah.
have ratables that many,
Right.
as many as others.
So this is a good.
And that 160 number is somewhat arbitrary. That's not a set number and one.
No,
Like
and
I
that's
said
the
earlier,
idea. You can-
we're not
you can
requiring
determine
it.
that number.
It would be based on individual property owners and how many apartments they would want to build if we were to allow that in our code.
Right.
Yeah, but
We're
any
only
So-
kinda
developer is
coming
going to want
a
to
number.
maximize,
Yeah,
right?
Uh-huh.
They're
we're
gonna
coming
be
to a number so we can assess like how much sewer flow does that equate
And
to?
the-
How
Right.
much
And the
traffic
height
does
of the
that equate to?
building.
We have to come to
Planning.
some kind of number so we know what we're talking about, otherwise we're just, but we don't know if that number will ever. Look, you could do 108 right now, there's none. Why? Nobody's doing it because it's not economically feasible.
And
But you could have done 108 for 20 years now, and no one has done them.
And we can do the height and how many stories,
Absolutely.
which is really important.
Yes, and you'll see their design was keeping it
Low.
low.
But how was it that the developer who submitted a prior plan had less units? Not a whole lot less, but it was like 15 less. So he thought he could make it work with 145 units.
Well, that was
He was
just on
only
his,
part
this
on
is
his
160 on everyone's. So he would get
Oh, okay.
proportionally less.
All right, this was the whole thing, not just his.
And that's
Got
just
it.
him. So he would not achieve the number he was necessarily looking for either.
Okay,
It would come down. But if it came down, then eventually someone will say, I can't make it work, the numbers don't work. And it's not us being so sympathetic to developers, it's just an economic exercise. for
It'll
someone.
never get built.
You know, if you're planning for something, you wanna plan for something that can really happen, not
gotta be
just, you
used.
know, we're not just doing this for fun.
It's not really
Okay.
fun.
You're not having fun. Are those for us, or are those?
Yes,
keeping
although I
those-
realized I think I should give you the whole thing instead of
Okay.
just these, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna reprint the rest of
All
it.
right,
This
well,
is only
thanks,
one
this was a
picture.
great overview for
Thank you, Jen.
us.
Thanks for having me.
And also,
Thank you,
one other
Elizabeth and
thing,
Paul.
go back to the
Sure.
question I asked before.
Yes,
Do you have any paperwork or it's drawings on that, the parking lot?
on the parking lot.
On the,
Oh, and the best
community-
formerly,
yeah,
but best.
And then when you,
From back in the day,
Yeah.
I don't, but
Okay.
I would be happy to, it was really a, conceptual thing.
Yeah.
I don't think he ever actually submitted an
Okay.
application, but
A lot of
That would
people
be-
have been talking about that concept, so it would be something.
that would be
you know.
amazing. I
Yeah.
mean, it's sort of like what's old is new, and that was an old idea from a
Yeah.
long time ago, and maybe his time has come.
Absolutely.
we
So
have to
that
be
would be
happy.
fantastic. But
Yeah.
again, also there's concerns with the neighbors.
The neighbors on that,
So
if they would want
I
that,
caution
yes.
anything there, so. Okay, great.
All right,
Thank you,
Thank you.
Elizabeth and Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, see you later.
All right, the next the next discussion topic is the Community Housing Fund Project Plan, and Kara Box here to talk to us about it. Hi, Kara.
How is everybody?
Hey, Karen,
I have some handouts for everyone.
how's everything up in your new office?
Oh, it's great.
Great.
Pass this out to everybody.
Thank you.
How long have you been in there now? 3 months?
Well, we've been there since, July.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, wow.
Yeah,
Um,
a little while.
How's all the space working?
7 months.
It's working out great.
Thank you.
These your glasses?
No, they were here.
I thought they were yours.
At least we need them, I guess.
Too small for me.
What I'm passing out to you is just a copy of the draft project plan, as well as just really an overview of the programs that are listed in the plan, so. So the Community Housing Fund Project Plan is an addendum to the town's housing plan, which was adopted by the town board in 2022. The addendum was prepared in order to provide the public with some information about the programs that could be available with the CHF funding. The addendum was also prepared to give the Community Housing Fund Advisory Board some guidance to make recommendations to you, the town board, for funding for eligible projects and programs. Town Law Section 64K, which created the Peconic Bay Community Housing Fund, sets forth the purposes for which the fund can be used. And there are 6 categories or purposes. The first one is to provide financial assistance to first-time homebuyers. The second is to produce community housing for sale. Third is to produce community housing for rent, to rehabilitate existing buildings for community housing, to acquire existing housing units for community housing, and counseling services. So under these 5 categories, the Housing Department created programs that can be funded with the CHF money. You will find these programs listed in your addendum. They are 4 programs for first-time homebuyers. There's a program to assist with the development of affordable housing. There are 3 programs to create affordable rental units. There's a program for the town's volunteer essential workers. And there's a program to keep the town's workforce, seniors, and disabled living within the town. So let's kind of talk about some of these programs, and I'm just gonna bullet point them for you. So in the housing plan, it's on page 7, begins the funding programs. So under the heading Financial Assistance for First-Time Homebuyers, one of those categories, we have a down payment assistance program.
So CHF will provide 3% of the down payment. Typically, buyers need 5% down, they would have to provide the 2%. CHF could provide the 3% down payment. The loan is paid back to CHF when the home is sold or refinanced. The buyer doesn't make any monthly payments and pays 0% interest on the loan. The next program is a shared equity program. It would be available to low, moderate income home buyers. That's up to 80% of the area median income. The CHF pays a percentage of the cost of the home. CHF would then share in the appreciation of the home when it's sold or refinanced. The next program is a remodel program. This program will allow first-time home buyers to rehabilitate housing to make it livable. It would include like zombie homes and foreclosed homes. Would allow them to make repairs to dilapidated homes to make them livable. It's really a win-win for a first-time home buyer and for the neighboring community.
Does that include 72H in this too?
It could include 72H for sure. Yep. Next program is an employer-assisted down payment program. This program would work in conjunction with an employer who already offers a down payment assistance program to first-time homebuyer employees. It could include a match program, interest rate buy-down, deferred and repayment of loans. Okay. The next category we're going to move to are programs that produce community housing for sale. And we've developed an affordable easement program. This program is for developers who want to build new affordable housing. CHF would be able to purchase an affordable easement that would restrict the development on the property to affordable housing. The funds could be used to purchase land or for construction costs. The amount of the grant would be based upon the developer's proposal and the scope and need for each of the projects. The next program is a program that would produce community housing for rent. And we have, under that, we have the accessory apartment program. This program provides a homeowner with a no-interest 20-year loan to create an accessory apartment on their property. The tenant must work 30 hours a week within the town and must income qualify. The property owner must charge an affordable rent that is in compliance with the town's affordable rent guidelines, and there is no income limitation on the homeowner. The next program would be a motel conversion program. This would provide.
Is that under a state code that we're adopting when they say there's no income limitation for the homeowner?
So there is a program that New York State has, which is called the +1 ADU program. And under that program, the state restricts the income of the homeowner to 100% of the area median income. So our program would differ from the state's program in that our program would not restrict the income of the homeowner. So anyone who wants to build an ADU on their property would be able to do so.
I have a question. It says both the homeowner and the tenant must occupy the apartment as their primary residence.
Either the apartment or the primary residence. So.
And as far as the tenant that would go in there, they would have to meet the criteria that we set down, the affordability criteria.
That's correct. So
Okay.
the tenant would have to income qualify, and we would check to make sure that, the tenant is under the income limitations that the town requires. And then the tenant would also have to work within the town of Southampton at least 30 hours a week.
Okay, so the board knows, that was our target demographic was people who qualified for affordable housing. Not necessarily the owner, but the tenant, and we want them to be in the community working.
And what
That's
happened-
correct. We were saying, with
That's a policy decision on our part.
the previous town board had made a determination that anybody who wants to create an ADU on their property should be allowed to do that because they are providing a service to the town. The tenant would be restricted in the income limitations, and the rent that homeowner could charge would also be restricted. So that was a policy's decision that the previous town board had made.
And the reason behind that policy was because we currently have an ADU law in place, but we were finding that people weren't building them because the cost of building them, you can't rent them for the affordable rates at the cost of construction now. So if we could offset the cost to build it, then it made sense for them at the affordable rate.
Did that
That's exactly it.
program that was previously in place have an income limitation on the owner, or it never did?
So, well, I think what Cindy's referring to is that just under our accessory apartment law,
Yeah.
that would allow for the construction of these ADUs, we were finding that people just weren't building them because of the cost and because our accessory apartment law restricted the rent to be affordable. So they were finding that they couldn't build it, the cost of building it, you know, it didn't make sense for them when they could only charge an affordable rent. So we came up with this program, which is a companion to the state program.
Mm-hmm.
The state program, the state has awarded the town $2 million to incentivize the creation of ADUs. We have had such a,
One time?
it's a one-time, we're hoping that there'll be more rounds. The state just did come out with a second round, but that's not being offered to townships that already have a program in place. It's being offered to towns that do not have a program in place. So, but we're hoping that there'll be more money available for that. So
And a lot of people took advantage of that.
we had a tremendous response to that. So we have more applications than we do funding for that. So that was really the thought behind this program, is to give some more money to create more of these units.
And we also had people that applied for that program, but they didn't make it in because they just made a little too much money to qualify.
Exactly right. There is a case where there was a school teacher and her husband who worked in the contracting industry, and they were over the limitation. They have 2 young children, and they were looking to have some additional income to come in to offset daycare and things like that, but they did not meet the income limitation of the state's program, so they could not get the grant. So, okay, so just moving on to other programs that are available under,
If I just might,
Sure.
the
Sorry.
Zoom doesn't seem to be broadcasting. I just wanted to check in. Just
We're
to
not,
make-
work
Oh,
sessions aren't on.
oh, okay. Oh, it was, but we're not. Oh, got it. Okay, sorry. Thank you.
so under community housing for rent, we have a motel conversion program. It provides a low-interest loan for the rehabilitation of old motels to be used for low, moderate income housing for the town's seasonal and year-round workforce. We also have a commercial property conversion program, or it's called an adaptive reuse program. Provides financing for the conversion of commercial property into affordable rental housing. A developer can use this low-interest loan for site acquisition and construction costs. We also have a program for volunteer essential workers. This would assist the town's low, moderate income volunteer essential workers with direct mortgage assistance payments in order to make a home affordable. The volunteer must be critical to the town's public health and safety, and who uses their personal time and expertise to support various essential services. The program is designed to assist with direct mortgage payments during the time that they volunteer. We also have a program for the town's workforce, seniors and disabled persons. CHF funding can be given in exchange for an occupancy restriction for the workforce housing seniors or disabled residents. It's an affordable easement program, and there are 2 ways that this can assist in providing affordable housing. It could be a down payment assistance to purchase a home that will restrict the occupancy, or it can be an annual cash payment to the owner of the property, which would be the difference between the market rate rent and what the affordable rent would be. So, this, as I mentioned, this is an addendum to the housing plan, which was adopted in 2022. Under the town law, the housing plan is required to be updated at least every 5 years. So that was 2022, so by 2027, it would have to be updated. This addendum you know, we can see if these programs are working or not working. We can amend it as needed if, you know, if they don't seem to be working, or if they do seem to be working or need to be tweaked, we can do that. So, you know, that's really the purpose of this housing plan.
What about the preferences that we're setting out here? How are those, okay, they're okay to do in this context, but tell us why.
Sure. So the preference that we have would be that, or the requirement would be that somebody work within the township at least 30 hours a week. And, you know, we have to be careful when we set preferences, because we have to make sure that there's not a disparate impact upon a protected class. And that, that preference or restriction does not have a disparate impact upon a protected class when we say that you have to have a job within the town. We're not making it a requirement. They could have an offer coming into it, saying that they have an offer to work within the town. They don't have to currently have a job, just that they will have to have an offer to work within the town. So, and I have run it by New York State to make sure that, you know, they were agreeable with the fact that it didn't, you know, violate fair housing, and they were in agreement with that.
Did they, by any chance, give any kind of written opinion that you could put in your file?
Yeah,
Rebecca?
no, I don't have a written opinion, but that's something I can request, yeah.
In one of the portions of 64K, they do mention local, you know, individuals who are local for home buying portion. And their definition of local was someone who lived here within the past 5 years, someone who works here, or someone who currently lives here.
That's right.
So there is that in the state law that we can build off of, I've always thought.
Yeah,
Oh.
that's in the state law for the first-time homebuyer programs, that they do require it for, you know, people who work or live within the town, and they define as living within the town anybody who has lived in the town within the last 3 years. So they could have left, maybe they were forced to leave because they could no longer afford to live here, but if that's within that 3-year period, they can come back.
But I don't know how that, I can understand what you're saying about working here, but not living here, because I thought that was the whole point of, you know, then you might be, you know, if it's like an all-white community and you're only letting people who live here avail themselves of the program, then that would have a disparate impact.
Yeah, so what we're saying is for the down payment assistance, you have to live or work here. So live or work, that terminology has been determined not to violate fair housing. Got to
That way,
live or work.
If they work and live somewhere else, they can move here. Cut down on traffic.
Correct, yep.
Okay.
And I imagine that's why New York State put that into the town law 64K.
So Kara, this is obviously in draft form. Are there certain parts of this that you've just reviewed that you find that will be more viable for the town? For instance, down payment assistance may be easier to do based on agreements with banks and whatnot, funding that we get. Have you sort of looked at that in terms of which aspect that you've laid out here will be the most viable for us moving forward?
Yeah, so what I'd like to start with is that ADU program. And one of the reasons why is because we know we've had great success with the state program, the State Plus One ADU program. So, and we have, under the state program, one of the grant requirements was that we work with a not-for-profit housing agency. And the town board selected the CDCLI as that not-for-profit housing agency. And so they have a program set in place already. They qualify the people, they look at make sure that the property qualifies, and they have contractors lined up and ready to go. So that would be the first program that I would recommend that this board kind of start with, kick off, because we can enter into an agreement with CDCLI to kind of run this companion program for us, and we could get that up and running right away, so.
What about down payment assistance? Because that seemed to be a very popular item that I've heard from people. A lot of folks, want to be able to just have that, comfortability, to be able to put a down payment on a home and start their lives. Have you looked at that? Have you assessed that?
Sure, yeah, we can, that we can do, as well. It would be, we would have to make a determination whether we're gonna do like a shared equity program or just a first-time home buyer down payment assistance program. We're gonna have an application up and running on our, on the town's website in the housing division. And people will be able to submit their application, we'll be able to kind of vet through them, and then start that program as well.
And the down payment assistance is great, but it's if you can't find a home under $1 million, you can't afford the mortgage, even if you can come up with the down payment. So it's kind of like, that's why I think the ADU and the rental assistance is gonna actually come more into play through this, because unless we are building units that are affordable, that down payment assistance really, it's not helping a lot of people make things affordable. Yes, you can get you in, but you've got to.
It'll help some, but not others, right?
Well,
certain areas.
It's kind of like dangling a carrot for something that you can't get to.
So will the program assess income, I assume, to see if they are, because, my knowledge of what, you do with Habitat for Humanity, for instance, Habitat really assesses the family or the applicant to see whether or not they're able to make mortgage payments. Can something similar, that process, be applied to a down payment assistance to know, you make over a certain amount, will you be able to make mortgage payments based on the inventory that is available for down payment
Yep,
assistance?
so right now, the town has a contract with the Long Island Housing Partnership to do those kind of things for us. We like to use a third-party agency to do all of those kind of things.
Okay.
So with any of the existing community benefit units that we have, when those go up for resale, we do have the Long Island Housing Partnership. We send the applications there, they vet them, they make sure that the person can qualify for a mortgage. They require them to go through mortgage counseling services, and then they let us know once they have a qualified person. This, I imagine the down payment assistance program will work the same way.
Right.
They'll let me know when they have a person that qualifies. They do the same thing with the state programs and county programs as well. That county program has a down payment assistance program, and the Long Island Housing Partnership brings to them a qualified buyer who has selected a home, and they know that we have the down payment for them.
Because I think that's important, because when we talk about, opportunities for a variety of the population here in Southampton, it's not just, working class folks, it's also, middle class folks that are struggling. They might, make decent money, but they can't afford to live here. So there is that sort of middle ground. We want to appeal to as many people as possible so that they can live here. We have a vibrant community.
Yep, and I think some of the, we need to have apartments that are affordable for the people who are starting out, because, if an apartment is affordable, now they'll be able to save the money that they need for a down payment. When an apartment's not affordable, they're not saving any money for a down payment to then purchase a home. So
Right.
we need to kind of have the stepping stone too.
Yeah.
And the apartments is a crucial component, I believe, that has been lost in this community over the past 20 years. I can remember being a young person, you could rent winter rentals that were pretty attainable, and then do whatever you were going to do for the summertime. So the accessory apartment, I believe, is certainly going to be one of our first initiatives here, and that's going to require some code work on our part, and we're going to be introducing some code in the springtime, so the board will be looking at that as well.
Did you have something?
No, I was just gonna say that it really is too, a big part of this too is, I like to see that there is, counseling available and because, my first mortgage was a Sony May mortgage. I had to go through a whole budgeting course and, and they really put you through the test of, can you manage this? Because a lot of people say, oh, yeah, I can make that payment, but you don't put all the other, the taxes and the insurance and everything else into play, and then it becomes like, it's like sticker shock on a new car, right? It's like, the tax.
Yeah.
Like
You
that
know?
no income verification loans that they.
Yeah, so it's good, and then also
Okay.
just having that as available to people that are maybe struggling to stay in their homes. Like, they have the home, if we can just give them that little bit of help to stay in that home, it's one less person that we have to find housing for.
Yeah, so part of what the Long Island Housing Partnership does, and I don't know if this was, you know, what you went through, Cindy, when you got just the Sony May mortgage, is I think it's a Saturday that the people come in and they have to sit down in a class and they really learn from different professionals, you know, about the mortgage process, and they also bring in, you know, somebody from the insurance industry, talk about homeowners insurance, they bring in a lawyer, I think, who talks about the legal process, and all these individuals come in and they get the counseling and they know, you know, what the process is in buying a home, so.
I mean, I remember Diana Weir came to our CAC one time, we were talking about housing opportunities, and she was saying how it would be great, and a lot of people didn't know it was even available, that you could have, like, your, you know, your kid who's getting out of college, sit down and go through this process where they tell you basically, okay, so you want to own a home. These are the steps that you should start taking now to build your credit, to do, you know, to start budgeting and doing all these things, and it kind of puts everybody on that path to doing the right things to get to that
Yep.
point.
And I think
So-
that it should be noted that our first-time home buyer down payment assistance can be, you know, built upon with some of these other down payment assistance that's available. New York State has down payment assistance, and the county has down payment assistance. So all of those combined together, this is just an additional now source of
Could help a
funds.
combination.
A combination of all the funds together will help somebody buy a home.
And getting somebody to know that that's all available, because there's a lot of people that don't know that any of this is available.
Exactly
so.
right, and that's one of the great things about our agreement with the Long Island Housing Partnership is they do educate people about, okay, yeah, you're going to be applying for, you know, the town of Southampton CHF down payment assistance, well, you'll also have these other things available to you as well.
But what about housing and community services as a department of the town? Are you, is your department going to be doing outreach to the community because I think Councilwoman McNamara's point is a very good one. You know, something that I observed in county government sometimes is, you know, for instance, with septic improvement grants. You know, sometimes people didn't really, they weren't aware. They weren't, you know, well, here's a website, you know, and is there adequate resources to do outreach to make sure we're reaching folks who are going to be able to, you know, apply for these programs and benefit from them?
Sure. Yeah, in addition to the website, you know, we'll put all of these programs with, you know, a little, little information on each of the programs that people know what's there and what they can apply for. But yeah, I mean, I do lots of outreach to different community groups and let them know about these programs and that they're available. You know, we can definitely explore that as we get these things up and running.
Yeah.
What would be the best way to reach people?
And
Yeah.
Kara, we may need individuals in your department. Community Housing Fund does allow us to use that money for exactly what you're saying, for you know, advising and administration as well.
Yeah.
So
I'd love to talk about that, if, you know, contingent on this going
build that
forward.
out a little bit.
Yeah. I also had one more question about C, the remodeling program. You mentioned zombie homes and 72H. You know, can you tell me a little bit about what is currently in the inventory? Are we seeing more, this is what I've been told, more of 72H and zombie dwellings more on the west side of the canal? Is that true? And what have you observed?
Yeah, well, historically, I think our 72H homes have been west of the canal in the Riverside, Flanders area. But, you know, working with code enforcement is really going to be key here, because code enforcement will kind of alert my department to homes that are not in good shape, and that might be available. And I can certainly work with the lenders, the banks that have the liens on the properties, if it's a zombie home, you know, to kind of, you know, reach the public and let them know that these things are available.
How are
And
you
these
know-
homes are, excuse me, Councilman, these homes, they're required to register with the town.
Yes.
We do make them pay if they're not occupied, because we want banks to move them
Zombie.
in one way or another. So we do have a
Right.
Yeah, and then-
database
and
of those homes.
Yeah, code enforcement maintains that database, so that's why it's key that my department work with them on this particular program.
And you're working well
Yes.
with that?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I've been in touch with Ryan Murphy, and
Good.
he's already provided me with a list.
My next question is with respect to 72H. How do we receive information of those properties?
So the county alerts us about the
Right.
72H program,
Right.
about the properties. And we have almost like a right of first refusal to take a look at them, and let the county know that we have an interest in them.
Right.
And then we then have the ability, when it's put up for auction, to meet the auction price, to match it. And we can so choose that. But there haven't been, in the last couple of years, there haven't really been any properties that either the county hasn't come to us, or that have been properties.
They've been
Well, I was-
auctioning them off before they,
Well, that's what,
okay,
yeah.
you know this. you-
Yeah. So I've obviously,
Right.
we
Yes.
worked together on this when I was in the county. But I guess my question is are you seeing all these properties? Do you feel like there is a need for better communication with the county on this to make sure that we're seeing those properties before they go off to auction?
Yes, absolutely, and to give us time to do our assessment on them, to see if they are something that can be developed,
Okay.
so.
And what we're finding is that the county, what they do give to us or give us the opportunity to bid on are properties that are challenged,
Right, exactly.
unbuildable,
Right.
just, odd pieces that somebody
Yeah,
just stopped paying
that's
their taxes
What I
on.
mean, in the last, year or so, there haven't really been any properties that would be suitable.
Right.
But there were other properties that we weren't informed of?
There could be possibly, I don't know, yeah.
So, yeah, it sounds like that program needs to be sort of just redrawn a little bit on the county side of things, and it may require some collaboration with the legislator and possibly our county executive.
Well, I think this is a really great program, and thank you for all the work you put into it.
Yeah, thank you, Karen.
Don't take any comments as
Not at all.
but I am still processing one thing that I wanted to ask you about. And it's with the what are you calling them? The apartments.
The
If
ADUs.
if we allow that, what is the possible impact on communities that are already so dense? I mean, how can we do something to make sure that certain communities aren't overly burdened with more housing, especially since we don't have an updated comprehensive plan that says this is looking at the whole town and this is where we think the housing should go, and now it seems as though this step might add a lot of density to certain places and without us having any control over it.
Sure. So right now, our zoning code regulates the accessory apartments. So under our zoning code, you need to have a lot size of 30,000 square feet to be eligible to put an ADU on your property. So that's 3/4 of an acre. Unless you are located, your hamlet is located, or your area is located within an area where there are less than 500 people per square mile. And if there are less than 500 people per square mile, you can go down to a lot size of 20,000 square feet or half an acre. And that's really how the density is controlled, by that.
So our current zoning of ADUs was put in place, and it was done in a way that it wouldn't overburden areas like Hampton Bays. So where we're at right now, in my opinion, is we haven't put money into allowing people to build ADUs. And I feel like once we do that and we see what the obviously, we want them east of the canal, a lot of them. And that's where it's incentivized to be, and that's how the code was kind of written to kind of put them in those areas. So, in my opinion, is until we see that, you know, there's this great need for more that's not being met, we should almost see how the current zoning, which was put in place to account for that density issue, how many units can we put in those areas before we open it up to say, you know, Hampton Bays can have them? I mean, if you put down that lot size to less than 3/4 of an acre, you're talking about, you know, all these neighborhoods in Hampton Bays potentially having an ADU.
That's what I'm talking about.
And they don't want it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the current ADU zoning that was put in place was done with good thought and good purpose. And I think that now it hadn't been utilized because people weren't building them, because they weren't, and this was what I was getting feedback from people, and they weren't building them because they were saying, I'm not gonna spend X amount of money in construction costs and then have you tell me what I can charge rent for it, because I can't even make the mortgage payment on building that unit. Whereas now, if we're providing an incentive to build those units, let's see how many we get in the area where we said, this is where it's appropriate, before we open it up to somewhere else. That's my feeling.
So this is going to have to be addressed by some code amendment, right? So either we keep the code the same, or we introduce some changes. One of the problematic aspects of what you're saying, and I agree with the density component, that's why I voted yes on that legislation years ago. If we're offering money for ADU, a no-interest loan, we would effectively be offering it to certain portions of the town and not others. And that, to me, is a problem, you know, and I think we need to address that in some way.
Unless we're limiting it to lot size, does that take
That's
it
what we're
out of
doing.
that?
Yeah, so currently that is the way that the zoning code reads. So you need that, currently you need that 30,000 square foot lot size, which really it comes down to the fact that some areas like Hampton Bays and Flanders, those communities, the majority of those properties do not meet that lot size. With that being said, they are not completely prohibited. They just have to go to the zoning board of appeals
Mhm.
to get a variance in order to build an ADU on that.
Or
on
have
that
illegal
lot.
apartments. And one of the things we've seen in Hampton Bays is that their population has increased by 1,200 people, and, you know, from census to census. So people are moving into the area, and it's just a question of where. You know, we were just talking about the downtown, you know, area and where people move. So, you know, they are doing it. I believe that there are illegal apartments, you know, that was
There
stated
certainly
at this
are.
board, and then, or, you know, apartments that are getting variances for a variety of reasons. So I'd like to, you know, have the board discuss some of the code, you know, that we have, and, you know, move forward with that.
Wait, so what would the new code say? if
Well,
it's- I mean,
it's-
what are you thinking about in terms of changing the code away from the 30,000 3/4 of an acre minimum? Or
Well,
make it
that's one
larger?
possibility as well. I know there's a concern about folks in the school district, you know, and so it's just kind of a work in progress. It's not kind of ready for prime time yet, Supervisor, so, yeah.
Janice,
but
did you
we
want to
could
come
have
up and
this-
just say something?
Excuse me, thank you for letting me just chime in, but I would also just add that you could, hi Kara, you could phase or restrict a certain number of building permits annually. So you could say, we're only giving out 100
Yeah.
ADU permits per year
In certain
in
areas.
certain area, or something like that. You can put that in the code so that it's like a natural
That
like,
way you can watch the school
stopgap
district.
measure,
You can-
and
yeah,
then you
you-
can
yeah.
watch it, so it's not just like
If
a
the kids are going up
free-for-all,
in
it's
that-
only so many building permits will be issued for
Yeah.
these
Does-
ADUs
does-
per annum.
Is that in conflict with housing law?
No.
Yeah, you would,
Town of Islip does that.
Okay.
I think East Hampton does it as well. They restrict the number of ADUs per school district, as Bill said,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, we also have, if you're putting ADUs on these little lots in Hampton Bays without making them upgrade their septic, or, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
you have a
Like,
problem.
it's, you know, and without having sewering, it's an issue. I mean, they're small lots, they're tight, and it's not, you know,
Yes.
You could also, it shouldn't, it doesn't always just have to be 30,000 or not 30,000. It could be other parameters, like, and you can look at that.
The
Where
zoning
is
categories.
it, you know, you have to be in at least, you know, R40 zone, not R20, R10. Those are the little teeny lots. You know, you would say, you know, it's not permitted in an R20 zone, even if you have an oversized lot.
I just remember back to, I wasn't on the board at the time, obviously, but I remember the discussions that went into putting that ADU zoning in place, and there was a lot of dialogue about, you know, not having it in areas west of the canal and really trying to get people, because frankly, you put more people west of the canal, you're gonna, your traffic issues, it's not just schools, it's your traffic issues. All those people have to get to work. I mean, yes, some of them will be going west to work, but for me, the issue has always been getting people out this way and getting them to stay out here so that, you know, we don't have these big traffic impacts. And if you're putting everybody in Hampton Bays, you gotta get them all out of Hampton Bays, so.
Yeah, and nobody wants to put everyone in Hampton
I
Bays.
don't think
The
that's-
No,
truth
I
is,
understand,
many
but-
people come to the ZBA, they're the ones that need it the most. They're the ones that have the elderly parents, the brother, the cousin, whoever, that needs this unit, and that's
But I
all
feel
they
like
can offer them.
there's
And
a
they
process
come
for them. They
this.
can go to the ZBA.
Sure.
And they can make that case, and in most cases, I'm sure they get that relief.
Right.
But
off the
it shouldn't
bat, you
be
wanna
it
restrict
shouldn't be a given, like, here, you go.
No, I couldn't agree more. Like, we should put it where you need it, and, but knowing that some of the folks that are asking for that relief are in Hampton Bays, and we can't do anything about that. They come because they need it, and they're asking for help. So,
But I think what you're
there's
saying,
that.
Cindy, is the public does have the ability at the public hearing for the ZBA variance to, you know, give their opinion during that process. It wouldn't be an as of right, so the public
Exactly.
would have to.
but I
yeah.
would restrict it in the lower zone, the R10, the R15, the R20 zones, just take it off the table.
But like
If you don't
Councilman
want
Schiavone
the
said,
little
this
lots
is,
to have
this
them.
is definitely a conversation
Okay,
for
yeah,
another
we're
day
discussing
more,
code,
yeah.
and I was,
Yeah.
But I
we
mean,
could have had a different presentation with this, and, you know, there's a lot to say about that, and I do believe in our assistance program, our +1 assistance program. And I'd just like to say that an accessory dwelling unit is not necessarily always an addition to a property. Sometimes it's incorporated within the home itself, the living spaces in the
You
home.
need these back?
No, so I think what,
I had one.
Well, just you were saying, this was, sounded like people were saying, this is the program of all of the ones that we wanted to get
Right.
going
I was just
first,
gonna say
so,
that,
but
yeah.
if we're gonna change talk
So-
about changing the code.
But can this match the existing code?
yes, so I think that's exactly what I was just gonna say, Councilman Iacely, is that when you're asking me what program can we get up and running right away, I think we can still get this ADU
Mhm.
program up and running right away, but it would follow the rules of the code that is currently in place, which is you need a lot size of 30,000 square feet, unless you're within an area that has less than 500 people per square mile, then you can go down to the 20,000 square feet. So that's the way that the.
Or you're able to get a variance?
Or you're able to get a variance, right, so that's the way that the program would currently work. Now, I know with the +1, the New York State +1 ADU program, the way that CDCLI is prioritizing the program is those people who do not need a variance are getting the funding first, because they can kind of, you know, work with them quickly and get that up and running. So, but the other people who have submitted their applications, that, it doesn't mean that they can't get funding, they're just working on the ones that don't need that don't need a variance first.
My last question, what is the timeline on down payment assistance? What are we seeing in the future for that? Is that something
How
that?
quickly we could get it up and
Yeah,
running?
yeah.
Yeah, we're almost ready to go. We
Okay.
have an application we're working on, an online application, that will be ready to go. Right now, currently, the CHF fund has about $5.8 million, and that's through the end of November, that has been calculated. So, you know, if this board does decide to go through with the acquisition of the property that I presented at the public hearing on
Whatever.
Tuesday, we still have some funding left to put towards an ADU program and to put towards you know, to the down payment program. Now, with that being said, this board still does have an opportunity, if they so choose, to bond. So,
How do you monitor the tenant situation? I mean, what if somebody rents to somebody with the income limit, but then in, you know, a year, that tenant leaves and then they rent out at a market rate?
Yeah, so every year, my office monitors by sending out an affidavit, and we require the tenant to provide us with a signed affidavit under penalty of perjury of law that the unit is their primary residence, and their income, you know, hasn't changed beyond the limitation. If their income changes, we do allow a year time for them to continue to live in the unit, and then they would have to leave the unit so that the unit would be affordable for somebody else.
And
But
is
how
the
do we
affidavit
monitor?
considered a government document? In other words, it holds a lot of weight. If
Yes,
they-
yeah, they have to sign it, it has to be, it's a notarized document. If we have not gotten those affidavits back, we do send code enforcement to the property to knock on the door and hand them the affidavit for signature.
Because it could be a new tenant in there
Could be a-
that didn't
Yeah, now, if it's,
qualify.
yeah, if it's a new tenant, they are required to register with code enforcement, that, they are required to register that new tenant with
Like a
code
rental
enforcement, which would then trigger the fact that they have to submit the documentation to me, which would be the new lease agreement and the tenant's, the tenant's income, proof of income. So that kind of would trigger it if, once, the lease term ends or the tenant leaves, they have to fill out a new, rental permit with code enforcement.
And what about one category of tenant, I thought you said was like an elderly family member? They're not gonna, are we providing the money for someone to rehab their home to create this unit, but it's not addressing, an affordable need?
So, under our current accessory apartment law, if it is an immediate family member, they are exempt from the income requirements, but it still is required to be their primary residence. So we have had quite a number of people that have applied for the +1 ADU program for their disabled children. They need an ADU or a separate place for their disabled children to live, or their elderly parents. And now, those people would be exempt from the income requirements.
There's a very, very high need for especially autistic children because there are no more, it's very hard to get into housing.
Yeah.
And there's just nowhere, and, the parents want them to have some sort of, independence, and this program allows them to do that, and they're still on property, and they're still able to provide their services, but they still have their own space, which is great.
Exactly. Yeah, we've had several applications for just that scenario.
And over time, the CHF monies will be returning, even though it's a non-interest loan and we're kind of losing value on it, but we are getting these apartments for the community for the reasons that have been stated here. But it will be a funding stream of sorts for the community housing fund that can be rolled over into other initiatives.
Correct.
Oh, this isn't due on sale, this is due after a year two, you start making the payments
They
back.
start making the payments, yeah. So the way it would work with, if we work with CDCLI, they would collect the rent payments and put them back into the fund for additional ADU loans. So it would be replenishing that ADU program.
Just an aside, the monies that we have in the community housing fund, that does gain interest, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
So-
What's the interest rate on it?
Yeah, well,
That-
it's variable,
that's a
but we
targeted
get a
question.
good
Okay.
interest rate with our bond rating. So
Got it.
Yeah.
I think we're getting 4.8 right now, it's
Okay.
near 5%.
All right, thanks.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, now we have two.
So if the board, if I may, just while you're still here, we have a public hearing that we're going to have at our next meeting. I'd like to put on a resolution to adopt this. And is that, what do you think of that? I don't want to keep the public hearing out longer than it necessary.
Keep in mind, we're still
Oh,
waiting
right.
for Suffolk County.
Pending
Still have to
Suffolk
wait for
County
the
planning.
Commission.
Yeah, so if the Suffolk County Planning Commission does respond to our submission, then we would be ready to submit a resolution of adoption.
Yeah,
Okay, we'll
Yeah.
wait for that.
all right, thank you.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so I need a motion to, what, go?
Happy birthday, Janice.
Oh, happy birthday.
All right, a motion to go into executive session and then close.
Second.
All
Well,
in
just say what
favor?
we're going in for personnel.
Oh.
Yeah, we
you're
have to
right,
list
you're right,
them.
of course. Where is it? Personnel and contracts. All right, so the motion as amended,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.